The irony of life has a cruel sense of timing. Sometimes the person you dismiss with a glance holds the very key to your existence, and sometimes the hand you push away is the same one that once pulled you from the brink of death. Victoria Chen learned this lesson on a Tuesday evening that would reshape everything she thought she knew about worth, dignity, and the invisible threads that connect us all. Victoria had built her reputation as the most formidable event coordinator in Manhattan on one simple principle: perfection was non-negotiable. Every detail mattered, from the crystal stemware to the precise angle of each napkin fold. Her galas weren't just fundraisers, they were masterpieces of social orchestration that could make or break careers, secure million-dollar donations, and cement legacies. Tonight's Children's Hospital Foundation Gala was her crown jewel: 6 months of planning, 500 of New York's elite, and a guest list that read like the Forbes 400. So when she spotted him near the ballroom in trance, her perfectly manicured world tilted off its axis. Marcus Williams stood awkwardly in the marble foyer of the Plaza Hotel, tugging at a tie that had clearly seen better decades. His weathered hands, permanently stained from years of industrial cleaning solutions, clutched an invitation with the reverence of someone holding a lottery ticket. The black suit, though pressed and clean, hung loose on his thin frame, a thrift store find that couldn't quite disguise his station in life. Victoria's heels clicked against the marble as she approached with military precision. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "I think there's been some mistake." Marcus looked up, his kind brown eyes meeting her steel-gray ones. "Ma'am, this is a private event. Invitation only." She gestured toward the golden ballroom doors where photographers, flashes illuminated arriving socialites. "I'm going to have to ask you too. I have an invitation." Marcus held up the embossed card with quiet dignity. "See, it's got my name on it and everything." Victoria squinted at the invitation, her mind racing. Marcus Williams. She'd personally overseen every name on that list, had cross-referenced it 3 times with the foundation board. There had to be an error. Perhaps some well-meaning volunteer had mistakenly included the janitorial staff in the mailing. "I'm sure it's a misunderstanding," she said, softening her tone just enough to seem sympathetic rather than cruel. "These events can be overwhelming. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable." "I work here," Marcus interrupted gently. "Been cleaning these halls for 15 years. I know my way around just fine." The words stung more than Victoria cared to admit. Of course he worked here. She'd probably seen him countless times, emptying trash cans and mopping floors while she barked orders into her headset. He was part of the invisible army that made her events possible, yet she'd never really seen him at all. "Mr. Williams, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the cause," she said carefully, "but this is a $5,000 A-plate dinner. There are protocols, expectations. I paid my way." His voice remained steady, without a trace of anger or defensiveness. "Took me 3 years of saving every extra dollar, but I earned my seat at that table just like everyone else." Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks. 3 years of saving. While she spent more than that on a single pair of shoes, this man had sacrificed for 3 years to attend one dinner. The mathematics of it made her dizzy. How many hours of overtime, how many skipped meals, how many small dreams deferred. But the gala couldn't afford any disruptions. Board members were already arriving, champagne was being poured, and the silent auction was about to begin. One out-of-place guest could create whispers, and whispers could derail the entire carefully orchestrated evening. "I'm going to have to insist," she began, then stopped. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, not hurt or anger, but a profound sadness that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime's worth of closed doors and dismissive glances. He folded the invitation carefully, tucked it into his jacket pocket, and nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. "Have a good evening, ma'am." As he turned to leave, Victoria felt an unexpected pang of guilt. But the feeling was quickly overwhelmed by relief as she watched him disappear into the elevator. Crisis averted. The evening could proceed as planned. The gala unfolded flawlessly. Speeches were delivered, checks were written, and Victoria orchestrated it all with her usual precision. By 11 o'clock, she was exhausted but triumphant. Another successful event for her portfolio, another step up the ladder of her ambition. She was gathering her files in the empty ballroom when she overheard 2 board members talking near the bar. Did you see the tribute video? Dr. Sarah Martinez was saying to her colleague. I had no idea about Marcus Williams. 15 years of volunteering in the children's cancer ward, and nobody knew. Victoria's pen froze mid-signature. The man's a saint, replied Drive. Robert Chong. Remember the Pemberton fire 5 years ago? He was the one who... Wait, which fire? Dr. Martinez interrupted. The apartment building in Queens. Made national news. Some hero went back into the burning building multiple times, saved 6 people before the fire department arrived. Turns out it was Marcus. He never told anyone, never wanted recognition. We only found out when we were researching his volunteer work for tonight's presentation. The papers slipped from Victoria's hands, scattering across the floor like autumn leaves. The Pemberton fire. 5 years ago, a Tuesday night in Queens when Victoria's world had literally gone up in flames. She remembered everything with crystal clarity. The acrid smoke filling her lungs, the impossible heat, the way her legs had given out on the 3rd floor landing. She'd been visiting a client's apartment to finalize wedding details when the electrical fire started in the basement. By the time the alarms sounded, the stairwells were already impassable. She remembered the figure emerging through the smoke like an apparition, faceless in the darkness, strong arms lifting her, carrying her to safety while the building groaned and sparked around them. He'd whispered reassurances in her ear, told her she was going to be okay, that someone was waiting for her on the other side of this nightmare. He'd disappeared before she could thank him, before she could even see his face clearly. The paramedics said he'd gone back inside, 4 more times, pulling out Mrs. Chen from 2B, the college students from 4A, the elderly man who could barely walk. A guardian angel, the newspapers called him. A mystery hero who vanished before anyone could get his name. Victoria's knees buckled. She gripped the edge of a table as the full weight of the evening crashed down on her. The man she'd turned away, the man whose dignity she'd trampled in service of her perfect event, was the same man who had risked his life to save hers. She ran toward the elevators, her heels echoing through the empty corridors like gunshots. The lobby was deserted except for a few late-night stragglers and hotel staff preparing for the next day. She burst through the front doors onto 5th Avenue, scanning the sidewalks desperately. He was sitting on a bench across the street, feeding breadcrumbs to a small cluster of pigeons that had gathered around his feet. Still in his thrift store suit, still carrying himself with quiet dignity despite everything. Victoria's breath came in short gasps as she crossed the street, dodging late-night traffic. When she reached the bench, words failed her completely. She stood there, trembling, as Marcus looked up with mild surprise. "Ma'am, you all right? The Pemberton fire," she managed to whisper. 5 years ago. 3rd floor. That was you. Understanding dawned slowly across his features. He studied her face in the glow of the streetlights, and she watched as recognition took hold. "You're her," he said softly. "The young lady from apartment 3C. Victoria collapsed onto the bench beside him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You saved my life." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the pigeons peck at the scattered crumbs. "I just did what anyone would do." "No." Victoria shook her head violently. "No, that's not true. Most people would have run. Most people would have saved themselves. But you went back, 6 times. You risked everything for strangers. Couldn't leave anyone behind," he said simply, as if discussing the weather. "Wouldn't be able to live with myself." They sat in silence as the city moved around them. Taxis honking, late-night revelers stumbling home, the endless rhythm of New York that never quite sleeps. Victoria thought about all the times she'd prioritized image over humanity, success over compassion. She thought about the invisible people who made her world possible, the ones she'd never bothered to see. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "I'm so sorry." Marcus turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw no anger, no resentment, only the same kindness that had carried her to safety 5 years ago. "You don't need to apologize," he said. "You were doing your job. My job was cruel. Your job was important. That gala raised $500,000 tonight. That money's going to help a lot of sick kids." Victoria stared at him in amazement. Even now, even after everything, he was making excuses for her behavior. "How do you know how much we raised?" Marcus smiled for the first time that evening. "Dr. Martinez called me with the final numbers. She wanted me to know that all those kids I read to on Thursdays, they're going to get the new playground they've been asking for. The pieces fell into place like a puzzle solving itself. The invitation hadn't been a mistake. The board had invited him as an honored guest, recognizing his years of quiet service to the children's ward. She had turned away the guest of honor from his own tribute dinner. "Oh God," Victoria whispered. "Marcus, it's okay," he said gently. "Really, I got to see you again, got to know you made it through okay. That's worth more than any fancy dinner." Victoria looked at this man. This extraordinary, humble man who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. Success suddenly seemed like such a small, hollow thing compared to the quiet heroism of caring for others. "What if I told you the evening wasn't over yet?" she said, pulling out her phone. 20 minutes later, the plaza's private dining room was hastily reassembled. Victoria had called in every favor she had, and somehow the magic of New York hospitality made the impossible happen. Dr. Martinez and 3 other board members arrived with the tribute video they'd prepared. The chef emerged from the kitchen with a specially prepared meal. Even a few of the gala attendees, touched by the story, returned in evening gowns and tuxedos to give Marcus the recognition he deserved. As Victoria watched Marcus finally receive his long overdue tribute, surrounded by people who understood his true worth, she realized that the most important lesson of her career had come not from a boardroom or a client meeting, but from a bench on Fifth Avenue. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, cleaning our floors and asking for nothing but basic human dignity. Sometimes the heroes walk among us wearing thrift store suits and carrying invisible wounds from a lifetime of being overlooked. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get a second chance to see them clearly, to recognize that true worth has nothing to do with bank accounts or social status, and everything to do with the courage to run toward the fire when others run away. The irony of life has a cruel sense of timing, but occasionally, it also offers grace. As Victoria raised her glass in a toast to Marcus Williams, janitor, hero, teacher, she understood that some lessons can only be learned through the alchemy of humility and the rare gift of perfect, devastating clarity.